Marcus's eyes opened to light that seemed almost alive, filtering through windows that curved and shimmered like liquid glass. His head throbbed in time with some distant, lingering echo of alarms and explosions, a ghost from the war he thought he'd barely survived. He blinked, trying to make sense of the ceiling above him, smooth, pale, and impossibly clean. A soft hum filled the room, vibrating against his teeth, and he realized it wasn't his imagination. Something in the walls, maybe the building itself, was alive in a way that made the hairs on his arms stand on end. Then he noticed her. She was there, lying beside him, her long ears stretching gracefully behind her head, catching the light like delicate arcs of polished silver. Her skin had the warmth and hue of a human, but her eyes flickered between violet and silver, restless and luminous. She moved slightly, stretching her fingers with the kind of precision that made him suspect every limb could double as a finely tuned instrument. Marcus coughed, a weak, raspy sound that made her smile or maybe smirk. "Ah, you're awake. Finally," she said, voice melodic, with a humor that danced in it. "I was beginning to wonder if you'd collapsed into a permanent coma out of sheer incompetence." I think I'm alive," he said, sitting up and immediately regretting it when his head spun. "Or maybe this is hell. It smells like coffee, which is suspiciously comforting for hell." She chuckled, the sound light and musical. "Not hell, though. I can see why you might think that. You've had a long war and an even longer morning nap. I'm Leora, by the way. You can call me that or Queen of all surviving beings. Either works, really." Marcus tried to smile. "Marcus, human Marcus. Last I remember I was, well, shooting things and getting shot at." "Impressive career summary," she said dryly. "Very concise. Also completely terrifying, but congratulations, you didn't die horribly. That's the first step toward being useful." He looked around the room. Devices hovered in mid-air, small orbs that emitted soft light and traced geometric patterns without touching anything. A pan in the corner sizzled with what smelled like breakfast, but the texture of the food defied description. It wobbled and shimmered as though alive, each piece humming faintly. "Oh, what is all this?" he asked. "And why am I not dead?" Leora leaned back, tilting her head, her long ears flicking with curiosity. "The first question is easier. Everything you see is either a healing instrument, a self-maintaining habitat, or an experimental kitchen. The second, well, consider it luck, or maybe my patience, or both." Marcus rubbed his temples. "Luck and patience don't usually involve alien women with ears like that, though." He gestured vaguely toward her. "Long ears, yes, highly functional," she said, mock offended. "They pick up subtleties of sound humans wouldn't notice. Also, they look good in the morning light." He raised an eyebrow. "So they're cosmetic and practical. Typical alien women, multitasking like a high-end piece of tech." She smirked. "And you, human Marcus, are still talking. That's impressive for someone who spent the last week not dying while everyone else tried to explode." He managed a weak laugh, then groaned, realizing his body was stiff, battered, and strange in its soreness. "You heal humans, too." "Partially," she said, floating to her feet with a grace that made Marcus stumble. "Mostly I provide the environment. Your body does the rest. Don't worry, you'll be walking like a slightly embarrassed cat in a few hours, maybe less, depending on your stubbornness." Marcus tried to stand, clutching a hovering railing that rose politely to support him. The floor beneath him pulsed faintly with light, sensing his weight, adjusting its texture. "Okay, so alien floors are polite now. Good to know. Next, will the walls apologize for my head injury?" She laughed again, and he noticed her voice carried a vibrato that seemed to resonate with the room itself. "Not the walls. You're on your own with those. But the coffee machine might forgive you if you approach it respectfully." Marcus hobbled toward the source of the smell, peering into a pan that shimmered like liquid metal. He poked it with a finger. The surface rippled, then reformed like it had never been disturbed. "Breakfast lives?" he asked cautiously. "Depends on your definition of life," Leora said. "It's perfectly edible, And yes, it might judge you. That's optional, though. He sighed, finally sitting at a small floating table as the pan hovered beside him. I survived the war, he said, more to himself than to her. Just to wake up in some alien B&B, with a coffee that glares at me and an alien woman who looks like she could crush me but chooses not to. Leora perched opposite him, her long ears twitching again. I prefer to think of it as selective encouragement. And also, don't underestimate me. You might survive physically, but I can make sure surviving socially is another challenge entirely. Marcus took a tentative sip of the strange brew. It was bitter, sharp, and somehow comforting. Okay, he said, raising his cup. You're not so bad for an alien. And you're not useless for a human, she said, mirroring his toast with a slight bow. Congratulations, Marcus. You've passed the first test, staying alive and being mildly entertaining. The hum of the room swelled, a soft undertone that seemed to synchronize with their breathing. Outside, the city shimmered with alien light, floating platforms, glowing streets, and distant vehicles that moved like metallic insects across the skyline. The war was over, the world strange and unfamiliar, and yet for the first time in days, Marcus felt the tiniest flicker of hope. He tried to imagine the coming days. Battles had ended, but the real challenge, understanding this alien world, surviving its quirks, and maybe, somehow, understanding Leora, was only beginning. He frowned and muttered, I hope the floor doesn't gossip about me while I sleep. She laughed, a sound like wind over crystalline towers. Oh, it gossips, but in your favor, mostly. You've got potential, Marcus, don't mess it up. He stared at her, at the long ears catching the sunlight, the slight curve of her smile, the way the room itself seemed to bend around her presence, and thought, maybe survival wasn't the hardest part. Maybe surviving with her, or even just understanding her, would be the real adventure. And in that strange, humming room with floating breakfast and judgmental coffee, Marcus realized he wasn't quite ready for peace. But he might just survive it, with humor as his shield and this alien woman as his unlikely guide. Marcus woke to the soft vibration of the room, a gentle hum that seemed almost like a heartbeat. The light outside the window had shifted to a pale green, the twin suns of this world casting long, glimmering reflections across the curved streets below. He tried to stretch but ended up toppling sideways off the floating bed, arms flailing. Leora, already awake and hovering a foot above the floor with casual grace, raised one eyebrow and flicked her long ears. Really, Marcus? Gravity isn't optional here, but your coordination seems negotiable. He grumbled, brushing invisible dust off his uniform. I survived interstellar war, and yet I can't survive getting out of bed without face planting. You're telling me the war wasn't the hardest part. She laughed, the sound ringing like crystal chimes. You humans dramatize so well. I find it entertaining. Here, let me help. She extended a hand, her fingers delicate but impossibly strong, and pulled him upright with a strength that made him want to apologize for his clumsiness. See, assistance is available. Accept it gracefully, or face the embarrassment of floating like a noodle in public. Marcus shook his head. You're going to make me wish I'd died in battle just to avoid this. Outside the windows, the city pulsed with movement. Platforms hovered, vehicles glided silently, and citizens, both human and alien, navigated the streets in a synchronized dance that made chaos seem impossible. Leora gestured for him to follow, her long ears twitching with each step as if scanning the environment for secrets. Welcome to the aftermath, she said. War's over, but peace, well, peace is far more complicated than fighting. They stepped onto a platform that hummed under their weight, levitating silently above the ground. Marcus nearly fell again, muttering, So now the floors have opinions too. They do, Leora said, smirking. Mostly they disapprove of clumsiness. And humans, but don't take it personally, it's habitual. As they moved through the streets, Marcus noticed the strange beauty of the city. Buildings seemed to grow like organic structures, walls pulsing faintly with energy, streets glowing with soft, responsive light. Holographic displays hovered at intersections, showing star maps, news from distant planets, and sometimes, inexplicably, amusing memes of alien leaders trying and failing to ride small hovercrafts. "Okay," he muttered, "this city is beautiful, terrifying, and completely nuts at the same time. How do you live here without tripping over your own jaw?" "You adapt," Leora said, her voice tinged with amusement. "Or you fall on your face. Personally, I enjoy watching humans attempt the former." They passed a group of children playing with floating spheres that changed color based on thought patterns, the kids laughing as the spheres turned pink, then blue, then purple in rapid succession. Marcus couldn't help but smile. "I wish we had toys like this back home, or, toys that didn't try to eat you if you made a wrong move." "Ah, nostalgia," Leora said, her ears twitching. "You humans cling to it. Dangerous but amusing. Here, try to keep up. We have errands to run before your brain overloads from cultural shock." The errands involved navigating through a sprawling market where humans bartered awkwardly with aliens over foods that moved on their own, fabrics that reshaped themselves, and devices that whispered suggestions about optimal purchase decisions. Marcus accidentally tried to pick up a levitating fruit only for it to float back to its vendor. "I think it hates me," he muttered. "Most things here do," Leora said dryly. "You'll fit right in." By midday, they arrived at a central plaza where a holographic fountain displayed historical battles in shimmering 3D. Marcus watched a reenactment of the war he'd fought in. But here it was told through the eyes of alien generals, showing strategies and maneuvers he hadn't realized were significant. "So this is how the war looked to everyone else," he said. "And they think we humans were, what, brave, stupid, dramatic." "All three," Leora said. "And that's why they allowed you to survive. You humans make war entertaining, even when you're terrified out of your minds." Marcus rubbed his face. "Great, entertaining human Marcus. That'll go on my resume." They walked through the plaza and Leora stopped at a small structure emitting soft light. "This is the neural garden," she explained. "You can plant memories here, grow them, revisit them, share them. It's a tool for healing or procrastination, mostly healing." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "You grow memories like vegetables." "Metaphorically, but yes, it's quite literal in effect. Careful, though. Overwatering nostalgia can be dangerous." He laughed, a sound rusty from disuse. "So I shouldn't drown in my past mistakes. Got it." Noted loud and clear. They spent hours in the garden, Marcus hesitantly engaging with glowing orbs that revealed fragments of his memories, each one bending and twisting in ways he hadn't expected. Leora hovered nearby, teasing him when he got frustrated. "Careful, Marcus. That one's particularly judgmental. I hear it still upset you called it boring during the Battle of Daxter 9. By late afternoon, they left the plaza and headed to an elevated street where vehicles glided past like metallic insects. Marcus, still clumsy, nearly collided with one. "Okay, so these things are fast, lethal, and judgmental," he muttered. "They're only judgmental if you make mistakes," Leora said, "which you do, frequently. Entertainingly, but frequently." They stopped at a small cafe suspended above the street, tables floating like lily pads on invisible water. Marcus stared at the menu. Drinks that changed flavor based on your mood, pastries that hummed faintly, and desserts that shimmered in impossible colors. "I don't know whether to eat or apologize," he muttered. "Eat first," Leora advised. "Apologies are optional but highly recommended if you break something." As they sipped glowing beverages and laughed at his failed attempts to navigate floating cutlery, Marcus felt a sense of calm he hadn't known since before the war. Humor, he realized, was more than a shield, it was a bridge. And Leora, with her long ears twitching and eyes glinting with amusement, was the anchor at the center of it. By evening, they returned to her quarters, Marcus wobbling slightly but smiling. "So," he said, collapsing onto the floating bed again, "peace is exhausting, and terrifying, and maybe fun if you survive it." "And you, Marcus," Leora said, perching above him, are surprisingly adaptable. You stumble, you swear, you fail at everything, and yet you survive. I find it charming. Don't ask me why, it's a mystery of the universe." He groaned but couldn't help laughing. "I think surviving you is going to be harder than surviving the war." "And yet," she said, tilting her head, "you'll probably do it. Eventually. But don't worry, I'll make it entertaining along the way." And as the twin suns dipped below the horizon, casting long, shimmering shadows across the alien city, Marcus realized that surviving peace, surviving Leora, was a challenge worth every awkward, humorous, and utterly improbable moment. Marcus woke to the familiar hum of the quarters, though today it felt different, calmer, almost approving. He stretched carefully, mindful of muscles he hadn't realized had tensed for months, and caught sight of Leora still asleep across the room. Her long ears were bent slightly forward, catching the early light like delicate filaments of silver, and her chest rose and fell in a rhythm that somehow made him feel steady, grounded. He smiled, realizing he no longer felt like a soldier lost in war or a visitor stumbling through alien technology. He belonged here, in some small, absurd, miraculous way. He floated out of bed, thanks to the gentle assistance of the room's intelligent floor, and found himself moving with more confidence than the day before. He paused at the window to watch the city below, glowing softly in the twin suns' light. Hovering vehicles zipped past in patterned chaos. Citizens, human and alien alike, moved with a fluidity that was almost musical. Peace, Marcus thought, was not simple. It was strange, demanding, and sometimes hilarious, like trying to ride a levitating streetcar without tipping over. But it was real, and he was part of it. Leora emerged from the bathroom, her long ears twitching with amusement at his newfound swagger. "You're actually coordinated today," she remarked, raising an eyebrow that mirrored the sharpness of her humor. "Did the war finally teach you balance, or are you just pretending to be competent?" "I prefer to call it controlled chaos," Marcus said, grinning. "Also, I've decided falling over repeatedly is no longer part of my charm. Well, maybe just a little for effect." She laughed, a warm, resonant sound, and they left the quarters together. Today was special. They had planned a visit to the Neural Garden, a place Marcus had come to love not just for its healing properties, but for the way it forced reflection, laughter, and occasional embarrassment. Leora guided him through streets he now knew like the back of his hand, and Marcus caught himself noticing details he had missed before: the glowing vines along the sidewalks pulsed in sync with the city's energy, the faint hum of airships overhead, and the subtle way alien citizens nodded to him now, acknowledging not just a survivor, but someone who belonged. In the Neural Garden, they walked among floating orbs of memory, some glowing gently, others shimmering with hidden laughter. Marcus reached out to one orb, feeling a memory of a battle long past, a time when he had been terrified, angry, and entirely alone. The memory bent around him, softening the edges, revealing moments he hadn't acknowledged. A human soldier lending him a spare ration, a whispered encouragement from a comrade he barely remembered, and of course, Leora's presence, guiding, supporting, saving him without question. "You're thinking too hard," Leora said, teasing him as she twirled past, her ears swishing like the tails of cosmic dancers. "Memories are supposed to be felt, not catalogued. Though I must admit, seeing you frown at them is entertaining." Marcus laughed. "You make it impossible to be serious for long. That's probably a good thing." They wandered until an orb caught his eye, one that hadn't existed before. It pulsed softly, depicting a future he had barely dared to imagine. Himself walking through alien cities, not as a survivor, not as a soldier, but as someone who belonged, sharing life with Leora and learning from a culture that had once seemed incomprehensible. The vision made him uneasy but also thrilled him. I think I understand now," he said. "Surviving isn't about fighting or enduring, it's about adapting, learning, and caring." Leora stopped beside him, placing a hand over his. "Exactly. You've done well, Marcus. You've grown. You laugh in the face of danger, navigate absurd alien systems, and you care. That's more than most survive with. He glanced at her, taking in the long ears, the subtle shimmer of her skin, the way her eyes reflected both amusement and affection. "And you've changed me too," he said softly. "I thought I knew who I was after the war. Turns out I barely knew myself. You taught me that surviving can be beautiful and funny, and sometimes full of pancakes that hum at you." Leora rolled her eyes, hiding a grin. "Flattering in your own awkward human way, though I do enjoy the pancakes." They laughed together, the sound mingling with the garden's hum, the pulses of light, and the soft whispers of memories. Marcus felt a weight lift he hadn't realized he carried. The tension of survival, the fear of loss, the loneliness of war. Humor, love, and shared experience had carried him beyond it, and now he could breathe freely. As the day ended, they sat atop a platform overlooking the city, the twin suns dipping below the horizon and casting long streaks of light that danced across metallic spires. Hovering vehicles zipped past below like fireflies, and the hum of the city felt like a lullaby. Marcus looked at Leora, and she looked back, her long ears flicking gently as she tilted her head. "So," he said, nudging her shoulder playfully, "do you think we'll ever get bored of this?"